different people, key people in government in these third world countries, and wine and dine them and have them come to the conference and, tell them how they should set up programs in their country for this vaccination and different things like that. So it's basically kind of on one level good that they're being informed about cervical cancer in women, but on another level, that's how their first level of staging, and then they go in and then they, basically offer all these other little services. We'll build you a clinic, we'll buy you, little scooters to go around so people can go to villages.
And then they describe to you how much money was spent on one meeting's alcohol? like
$12,000 for like a 2-day event. I was like, geez, I'd like to be the bartender there,
Well, it's the same thing international groups do with, say, county commissioners. They all fly them up for, $200 steak dinners 3 times a day and big shows and parties and 5-star hotels, and everything's paid for. And then, by the way, we're going to give you campaign donations if you'll pass this to standardized zoning laws. I mean, it's just all about control. And remember, they don't follow the same laws. That's the point. They go to these African and other countries, and they say, we're going to give you scooters, give you money, give you these things. Just let us come here and test drugs that they couldn't test here in the U.S. or England.
Right. And I have another friend who kind of sets up these conferences and things like that. And a lot of times they'll pay for their whole family to come and different things like that. And then you can't help it, they showed us a nice time, they let my wife come, blah, blah, blah. And then you start to feel a little beholden because they, in third world countries, if you show this kind of hospitality, you have to show hospitality back. So,
I've already had before the Air Force and people say, let us fly you here 5-star, let us do this and that for you, come see this facility. And they do that to all the media people. It's not like they're even targeting Alex Jones or come to Israel. See what it's really like in the West Bank. And it's all part of influence peddling is what it's called.
Right. And then they get all these clinics built or they work on a very base infrastructure and, kind of work up, but then they bring in kind of their key people from the region to be the overseers, and then they start their programs, and then they start adding what seems like maybe a legit program like, handing out, mosquito nets or something. And then pretty soon you're vaccinating people. So that's kind of how they, work their way in there.
And let's specifically briefly get into some of these vaccines. I mean, we're talking about a vaccine to go after a type of intestinal worm that, like you were saying, attacks its very DNA protein, and it's untested, and God knows what that's going to do to other proteins in the human body.
That's correct. And which is really odd because a lot of these parasites, coming from a ranching background, you can just go to like Rancher Supply and buy a jug of ivermectin, to worm your hogs or whatever. I mean, that's essentially what they're using is the human grade version of that.
And that's what the health workers previously did. You just worm them twice a year.
Yeah, it came in twice, maybe sometimes quarterly, and that's a pretty good, effective intestinal wormer. But now they're saying, why do they have to do that? Why don't we just give them one vaccine that will keep them from getting these parasites? And you're like, well, parasites evolve. Their protein coats change and things like that. So vaccinating somebody against something like that is kind of...
Plus, the worm is so similar. I mean, I'm not even a biologist, but I've read the reports when they've done tests in animals, and it is routinely causes all sorts of... You start messing with protein in the body with a quote vaccine to where the body has an autoimmune response to it, or how is that working?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, how do you know that protein sequence isn't like, something your intestine needs or, makes, and it's just...
Well, take Crohn's. Every major case of Crohn's, there's hundreds of studies on this. They find the measles antibodies from the vaccination impregnated into the guts, into the lining, and that's what's causing the autoimmune problem.
Well, and you don't know that if this protein isn't something like if you became pregnant or something, it would elicit a response and cause, spontaneous abortion or fetal abnormalities to create, so you would end up making antibodies against, if you were pregnant or, whatever, against the fetus. So it's really kind of a very suspect area. I mean, how do you know that it won't attack some sort of protein in your brain? You start making an autoimmune response to...
Well, and like you said, in China now, where most of our vaccines are being made for the U.S. alone, they're making a whole bunch of different types at the same facility. And then there's all sorts of problems there. And they gotten problems with regulators here, so they just moved to China. And then you talked about all the adverse health effects in these countries, and it's just covered up.
Right. And, this is kind of like tying into, poison Chinese thing. I was asking a friend of mine who's an epidemiologist and a public health person who has worked at the CDC. I said, when I was looking at, they give kids here in the U.S. like 17 vaccines. I said, why would anybody need a hepatitis vaccine unless you were going to live in a third world country where there's no plumbing, or you've been exposed to hepatitis directly, like eating at a salad bar or something? And her thought on it was, coming from the FDA, the CDC, the government there, is that we're getting so many contaminated products from overseas that they're preemptively vaccinating people because they don't want some,
That's right.
horrible hepatitis outbreak among people.
That's right. Don't tell Mexico to stop spraying human feces on the crops. Just give everybody a very dangerous vaccine.
Right. And, and they're giving just little, as an immunologist, giving a little baby that many vaccinations when your immune system isn't developed. I mean, you don't know how many people I've told who have or are having kids and just are like, don't do this. And they kind of look at me like I'm insane. They're like, well, if it was dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it is dangerous. Don't be vaccinating.
Well, it's been admitted the HP is very dangerous in babies, but then that's the really dangerous one they recommend for the newborns. I tell you, I mean, take Bayer. For over a decade, shipping out over more than a million ampules of Factor VIII, knowing they knew it had HIV and hepatitis in every shot, but they still did it. I mean, the mindset of these people.
Right. And, even thing from the Red Cross not wanting to test for HIV, and infecting people that way. So, a lot of it comes down to, money. Unfortunately, and
well, at least that's what they want us to believe. Oh, we put out blood banks and then on purpose don't test the blood, knowing we're going to kill millions. Or we don't test for I mean that is just incredible.
Yeah, and it's very scary how I had a friend who worked at Chiron, and I never could get them to admit to me what was so wrong with their flu vaccine, that it was so horrible. I mean, it had to be pretty horrible for them to pull it from the shelves, when everybody was panicking. And then I saw these little lemmings going, oh, I need my flu vaccine. You don't never get a flu vaccine, ever. I would never get one, and I'm an immunologist. I would never get a flu vaccine. It's just so full of filthy particles from things called cytokines and virokines, and basically, to put it in layman's terms,
DNA
it's what
fragments.
cells and viruses. No, it's also what cells and viruses poop out or excrete out. Like botulism. The Botox is actually bacteria poop. That they're putting in people's heads.
Well, now you've given out a little bit more about what you do as a scientist. We might want to be careful, but specifically, maybe I should keep you longer to get into what's in the vaccines, but describe those again, the excreta of the viruses and bacteria.
Yeah, they're called cytokines or virokines, and basically they're the products that, the cells are just like a human body. They eat, and then they reproduce, and then they also, excrete, poop, whatever they poop out. And so there's all these weird little protein fragments and things that they excrete out. A good example would be a friend of mine had some soup sitting around. She goes, well, I've heated it up and killed all the bacteria. And I said, well, you've killed the bacteria, but that's not the toxic point. The toxic thing is what the bacteria have excreted into your soup. That'll kill you.
Stay there. That's what gets you with most food poisoning, is it isn't the bacteria, it's their toxins. I mean, folks, that's what plaque is on your teeth. It's bacteria crap. Stay there. Just amazing interview, ladies and gentlemen.
Get up, stand Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right.
All right, we have research scientist on with us, an expert on vaccines. We'll just leave it at that. Top tier in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation previously. And she's told me privately and basically on air that morally she can't really work for Big Pharma now. She can't really work for Bill and Melinda Gates. I guess she's going to go into academia, back into that, or into government, but there's not that many jobs there because there isn't much oversight. And it's a revolving door there. Don't forget that over 100 million Americans, over 100 million, were given the SV40 cancer virus in their polio vaccine. That is still going on, by the way, in the third world. That is shipped to the third world to be given. And it definitely has caused massive increases in cancer.